opening of this forum, I would like to invite the Director and Representative of UNESCO Office in Jakarta, Professor Shahbaz Khan, to deliver welcome and opening remarks. Pak Shahbaz, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Pazaki. Most welcome to all distinguished colleagues for this sub-regional webinar, which is a policy dialogue on strategic education policy during COVID-19 and beyond. And certainly we welcome all colleagues from our cluster countries, the sub-region in Southeast Asia. So as has been introduced by Mr. Zaki, we have distinguished colleagues like Professor Nizam Said, the National University of Malaysia, UKM, and many of the guests of honor who are, along with other participants, making a big difference, like Miss Marina Bujang, Acting Director General of the Education, Ministry of Education, Brunei Darussalam, Mr. Nepomuceno, Malaluan, Undersecretary and Chief of Staff, Department of Education, the Philippines, Mr. Diosdado, San Antonio, Undersecretary for Curriculum and Instruction, Department of Education in Philippines, and also Mr. Mateo for the Undersecretary for Planning Services and Bureau of Human Resources and Organization Development from the Department of Education, so from Philippines as well, and all colleagues from Brunei Darussalam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Timor-Leste, my colleagues from UNESCO Office Jakarta under the leadership of Dr. Choi as well as Mr. Gunawan. So it's really very important for us to continue to think about quality education, especially SDG 4. How can we respond better during COVID-19 as still the pandemic is still there, and making sure no one is left behind, which is the spirit of the 2030 agenda. Today's forum will certainly facilitate policy dialogue to explore strategic education policy and planning during COVID-19 and beyond. And hopefully we will be able to follow up through this forum, which is a follow-up of the work we have been doing since June 2020. At the global level, Global Education Coalition is working very actively in supporting countries in scaling up their best distance learning practices, reaching children and youth who are at risk by providing technical assistance to quickly prepare and deploy inclusive distance learning solutions utilizing high-tech, low-tech, and no-tech approaches. In this context, UNESCO is working with the ministries of education in affected and concerned countries to ensure continued learning for all children and youth through alternative channels. UNESCO headquarters convened an extraordinary session of Global Education Meeting 2020 GEM on 22nd of October 2020, so very recent. In this meeting, heads of state and government, ministers from over 70 countries and international partners met online to discuss the global education trends. It was supported by the governments of Ghana, Norway, and United Kingdom. It adopted a declaration which shows very strong commitment to protect education financing, outlining measures for the next years to come for safeguarding education from the devastating impacts caused by the disruptions like COVID-19. The declaration gives us priority areas essential for education recovery in the 15 months, like taking every measure to reopen schools safely and inclusively, support all teachers as the frontline workers, and paying serious heed to their training and professional development, investment in skills development from socio-emotional dimension to gaining competencies for new jobs, narrowing the digital divide that has shut out education for 1/3 of world students. So in the declaration, dear ladies and gentlemen, governments and partners have stated their commitment to maintain or increase the share of public spending on education to at least 4 to 6% of GDP or 15 to 20% of the public expenditure. Stimulus packages which can not only mitigate the education losses, but go to all those vulnerable schools, increase the volume, predictability, and effectiveness of international aid, and especially target aid to countries and populations most in need, including those who are not reached by the government programs. In conclusion, the partnership between member states and international community is the only way forward to maintain and scale up commitments to education to the most critical investments for a sustainable recovery in the future. UNESCO Office Jakarta calls for the coalition amongst the governments, civil society, international organizations, private sector, and civil society representatives for coordinated and innovative actions at this sub-regional meeting. UNESCO will fully support and remains committed to our member states for distance learning through e-learning, sharing of the resources, sharing of the training, and sharing of the best practices. And while still there are areas which are still not fully functional from the point of view of face-to-face learning. So we are here to share our best practices, follow up on the declaration of the coalition, and how can we work together at the level of our cluster countries. And through this dialogue, we should be able to come up with recommendations which we can follow through to UNESCO headquarters with other member states, and hopefully this helps us in working together in bringing more South-South cooperation, but at the same time, learning from what is going on in the rest of the world. With that, I thank you all and look forward to the deliberations today. Over to you, dear Pazaki.
Thank you very much, Professor Shahbazkan, the Director and Representative of UNESCO Office in Jakarta. Thank you very much, Pak Shahbaz, for the warm welcome and also the opening remarks on the opening session of this forum.